I'm going to tell you how Jesus got the people of Israel out of the valley, okay? Because last week I spoke to you about the model of God, of Jesus. It was the incarnation. So when God had this problem of humanity running in the wrong direction and wanting the whole world to come back to him, what did he do? He sent a person into a place at a certain time to witness to those around him. And his name was Jesus. And what did Jesus teach? He said, I've got a great plan. I'm going to teach my disciples to go out into a specific place at a specific time to witness to the few people around them and spread the news, proclaim the gospel, be present, proximal. That's exactly what he did. That's why you're here, sat here 2,000 years ago, because it reached down to you. It's a clever plan because it comes with flesh and blood and it's real. And he chooses you and he puts his spirit inside of you. Now, we need to grasp the message right from the very onset. And yes, we're told in John 1:14 or Mark 1:14-15 that Jesus came and he preached about the gospel. He says the kingdom of God is near. Okay? That's a one sentence version. But the kind of sermon version is found in Luke chapter 4. Verses 18 and 19. Jesus returned to Galilee in the power of the Spirit, and news about it began to spread throughout the whole countryside. He taught in their synagogues, and everyone praised him. He went to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and on the Sabbath day he went into the synagogue, as was his custom. Note. And he stood up to read. The scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. Unrolling it, he found the place where it is written, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for his prisoners and the recovery of sight for the blind, to release the oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour." Now, I think Luke chose those particular words, and he didn't put the whole passage in because he doesn't waffle on like me. But I find it hard to believe that Jesus, having faffed about with this huge, great big scroll and rolled it until he got to that passage, without chapter headings, by the way, and then just read that small amount. I think he would have read on. He would have read most of Isaiah 61. And I'm going to read that to you now. Isaiah 61, the year of the Lord's favour. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives, to release from darkness the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and to provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow upon them a garland or a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, a garment of praise instead of the spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendour. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. Aliens will shepherd their flocks. Foreigners will work for your fields and vineyards. And you will be called priests of the Lord. And you will be named ministers of our God. You will feed on the wealth of nations, and in their riches you will boast. And I could go on about justice and mercy, but I think you get the point. So Jesus turns up God's great plan, and he delivers that message. Now, I hope you enjoyed the Jubilee last week. Okay? Do you know what Jubilee means? I'm sure you know what it stands for. The word Jubilee means ram's horn. Because if you read in Leviticus 25, when God describes how this Jubilee year is to work, he says it starts on the 10th day of the 7th month with a ram's horn being blown. Okay? Do you love the symbolism on the Jubilee before the Queen gets out on her balcony, this great big fanfare? Yeah? Those heralds, they're just echoing the things of the past. And right at the start of that year, they were to re-establish all the property. They were made to get rid of all the injustice. They were to look after all those who'd lost out, who were poor, who were needing healing, who were destitute, and everything was to be set right again. That's what Jesus came to do. And who does he decide to go about that? Well, he made a good start, didn't he? But did he heal everyone? He was at the pool of Siloam and he healed the person that God drew him to. And he recorded everyone who came, he healed everyone who came to him. And he chose specifically to heal everyone that the Father showed him. But did he solve all of poverty? Did he solve all of crime? Did he solve all injustice? No, he's given us that task until he comes again to finish the job. So I want to just show us what he's about. There's some words that he uses. Verse 4. He wants to rebuild. He wants to restore. He wants to renew the ruined. Now that, for me, is a message of hope and vision. Because when you're in the valley, it's really important that you know where you're going. When you're changing direction, going around a corner, it's really important to see the sign that says, bend ahead. I don't need signs. I have my wife next to me. There's a bend coming. Mind that tree. So, you need vision. Now, what I've been setting before you in the last few weeks is vision, future, what we've got to get against. And I'm leading you into that. I'm probably just a tiny bit ahead of you, about here. But you also need something else, which Jesus speaks about. A crown of beauty instead of ashes. An oil of gladness instead of mourning. A garment of praise instead of despair. That's why we come and worship God. Because there's an exchange that goes on. You walk in the door and you walk out the door, it's like, oh, it wasn't so bad after all. When we worship God, we lift our eyes in terms of vision. Yes, we do. But also, God gets down and he digs us out of a pit. Because when we get in the valley, it is very tempting to get stuck in a rut. It's a bit muddy and marshy down here. I was watching Top Gear this week and they all careered off the beaten track in one of those huge, great big motorhomes, and they thought they'd do a 3-point turn, and then they got stuck in the mud. Now, what's his name, the guy who's driving? I knew you'd be watching it. Paddy McGuinness. His response was like, we're going to go, shove it on the accelerator. Wheels turning 10 to the dozen, mud everywhere, and they just sank deeper and deeper in, classic Top Gear stuff. Now, a valley is a perfectly good place for a disciple to be. The pit is not. Now, we still get in a pit, don't we? We find it in Psalms. A slimy pit. Psalm 40. How do we get out of that pit? Well, it's no good having vision if we don't have grace. If I can spell it. What we need grace for is like Jesus gets down in the pit with us and he says, what you need is a bit of rubble here just to build it up a bit. Or, changes it over to snow tires or something like that, or puts chains on, or gives you a ramp to get out. Because actually when you're downcast and in a pit of despair, when you're mourning, when you're covered in ashes, you don't really feel like going anywhere, do you? So, yes, I'm trying to set before you and us the vision where I think God's leading us and what he teaches us. We do need to slow down in a time of transition and have grace. Grace for one another. And I was delighted this week to talk deeply with people about how they truly felt, and they felt like they could say it. That's a good sign to me, because I'm all ears, my door is always open, and if you can say something, however, then we can do something about it. There's grace in the body, isn't there, to help one another out, to do real relationships. Because if we just gloss over things, then we won't sort things out. Then he will bestow on us beauty, gladness, and praise. And I'll finish with this. It fascinates me that when Jesus is setting out this manifesto, this new urban economy, this new way of being, he says in it's all of verse 3. Once he's bestowed all that on us, he says, they will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendour. He's talking about us. We will become mighty oaks. He's calling that out in us. He plants little seeds and we become mighty oaks if we grow to maturity. And he's also speaking it, and it speaks through us when we take this message into our workplace or into our social place, into our neighbourhood. We can speak that out in other people, perhaps even people who don't know him yet. Because how on earth are we going to get this job done? We're not going to do it, us 20 odd people, are we? We're not going to get the job. But all the people around us, if we call it out in them, they're going to be able to do it. And let's not be in any doubt, we need God's Spirit. Jesus had the power and authority. You know, when he was anointed right at the beginning, he says, he has anointed me to do all this stuff. Well, David, in 1 Samuel 16, he was anointed with a horn of oil all over him. We, at Pentecost, and when we were born into the faith, we were anointed. We have that power and authority. We also need to bestow that on others. Like we were prayed a prayer of blessing this morning. That was brought to us Yeah? So my question for you this morning, we're just going to take some time just to discuss in our groups. I want you to think in the place that you are, it can be workplace, neighbourhood, social. What are the ways in which you can call out the message of Jesus in other people? And what is that message of Jesus that you can say, you can speak that vision into the place that you are?